everybody. My name is Tony, and I am a yoga teacher. And I'm so happy to be here. I know when I was a high schooler, one of the things that kind of probably drove my family up a wall is I incessantly researched careers. So I would have gotten a kick out of this at your age because I was like reading about what type of school you needed for everything, what you needed to do. Like, I was talking to people at like job events to figure out like what they did, what their life was like, how much they made, like how long they went to school. I wanted to be a flight attendant, a real estate agent, a physical therapist, a sign language interpreter at the same time in high school. So recognize that I see how kind of daunting it is to think about what you want to do with your life. You know, you're kind of at this age where you start to get this pressure from people of like, what are you gonna do? Where are you gonna go? And you're like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm gonna have for dinner tonight. Like, what do you mean? What am I gonna do for my life? And careers are changing right now, right? Like, let's be really clear. Careers are changing. Um, when I was in my 20s and I still was kind of floating around trying to figure things out and what I wanted to do, one of my customers, I was a barista at the time. I would just like make coffee all the time. I was like always on coffee. Like, so I was real upbeat because I just drank coffee all day. Um, but one of my customers was like, one day you'll realize you did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it all is just going to come together, which was a really weird thing for him to say because he was an accountant and he just went to school to become an accountant, right? It's like paved out. But it's true, especially now. There's going to be a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's going to come together to give you a career. Careers are not the same, right? You may not go to school and just like be a doctor. You might, if that's what you want, but things aren't as straightforward anymore. And like, I recognize that. Like, some of you are probably going to be podcasters and do a good job of it, right? So recognize, like, I am in that boat of a person who does not have like a straightforward career, right? And recognize that a lot of what you're going to be picking, a lot of what you're going to be coming into is the lifestyle you want. So as a professional yoga teacher, which that chose me, I did not choose it. It's all about the lifestyle you want, right? We could say as much as we're like, as my mom would say, I could say till I'm blue in the face, you know, go to school, get a job, and then everything will be fine. But what tends to happen is you start to kind of follow your interests and things kind of start to line up, right? So just getting that out of the way. Who here has done yoga before? I'm just going to ask that question. I'm going to throw that out there. Yeah. Yeah. You know, with your little screens off, you can like raise your little screen hand. I'm pretty sure. Little screen hands. Um, Yay. Yes, and chat. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So a lot of you have probably done yoga at least once. And now there's a lot of yoga in school. So that's actually really cool. I didn't have yoga in school. Um, how many of you know what the word yoga means? And you can also type no if you don't know.
I do not know.
But I'm assuming I'm assuming I'm getting a lot of this behind the faceless little cameras. So yeah, yeah. So the word yog or yoga comes from Sanskrit, which is a Indian, right? And it means union, right? And it's important to start to recognize, as someone who comes from a yogic background and I practice yoga, and I've been practicing for a while, what yoga is and what it means. So the word yoga means union, right? And if you have done yoga in the West, which we're in the West, right? What you have actually probably practiced is called asana. Okay. And asana means to take a seat. Okay. So the practice that you're doing here in the West, for the most part, unless you know what the Eightfold Path is and all that, and you like really study yoga, um, is mostly about the postural movement. But most yoga teachers are practicing yoga. They're not practicing asana, right? So I could tell you my movement asana practice, I might practice that once a week, right? Because asana is just how you move your body in space. It's just moving around, right? And that's a lot of what you'll get if you teach in the West in a very Western way in a yoga studio, which we'll get to all of that, okay? So don't worry. So, what I want you to recognize is asana or those yoga poses, that is only one facet of a philosophy that is 3,000 years old, right? Yoga originated in India and Kemet, right? So history and lineage is super important when we're talking about yoga, okay? And a lot of times if you have practiced yoga, most of the time you've only practiced asana and maybe you've not even heard the word asana, right? But it's important to recognize that if you are thinking about going into this field, that it is a very deep practice and study. And it's not as simple as going to school for something. Some of the first yoga teachers and the people who brought yoga to the West never went to school for yoga. The way that you really learn, because you can only teach what you learn yourself, you can only teach what you do, right? The ways that people traditionally learn is they pick a teacher and then they would follow that teacher around for years and they would learn their message and the way that they moved their body, the way they did asana, the way they meditated, right? Because yoga is moving meditation and asana gets you ready for seated meditation, right? So that's the whole practice is leading up to learning how to sit and to meditate, right? And so all that is to say is yoga is a deep and full and rich philosophy, right? And if this is something that's caught your interest, there is a lot of study and a lot of learning that can come from that. And it is truly really, really cool, right? I've been practicing for, I think, like 10 years at this point. So when I talk about yoga, I am talking about yoga. I'm not usually talking about asana. Sometimes I'm talking about asana, but most of the time I'm talking about yoga, right? And there are different types of conversations that we're having when we're talking about yoga, because we have to talk about the cultural context in which it comes from, and we have to talk about the cultural context in which it's placed, right? And so that means, if I can go back, there are a couple ways you can be a yoga teacher, okay? Some people are instructors, some people are teachers, and some people are therapists, okay? A yoga instructor in the West is probably going to be very asana or posture based, right? They're going to be instructing you on how to move and which muscles move which things and all of that. A teacher is going to be more philosophy based. They're going to show you the postures, but they're not going to tell you what to move and where to move it and how to move it. They're just going to show you and let you come into that yourself so that you can experience that expression in yourself, right? And then there's the yoga therapist, and they are applying yoga posture and philosophy to specific illnesses, right? Okay. So those are our differences in the way that you or we currently have yoga set up in the West. Okay. And a lot of prior yoga gurus were yoga teachers. It's philosophy interwoven with practice, interwoven with movement and things like that, and showing you, but I'm not going to tell you because you have to feel it for yourself, right? So there's different ways to approach it, and only you know if you're going to be an instructor, a teacher, or a therapist, because only you know what your practice is giving you, right? So, how did I get into this? I have to like think about it. I'm like, okay, let me go back to that place that I was in. Um, so I can tell you, I have no recollection of learning what asana was. I know that I got my first Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a yogic text, right? I got my first Bhagavad Gita when I was like 15. And I didn't understand all the context around that book, but it was all about yoga. And I was so interested in it because it was all about yoga philosophy. So my kind of foray into yoga and what it was started probably when I was like 15, 16, um, when I got my first yogic text. But what happened was, later life, all that, I went to school to be a social worker. And I was in school to be a social worker. I was working in crisis intervention and at the same time. And I remember I was also mentoring early college students. So I was also a college student mentor for freshmen. And I remember talking to one of my mentors, and we were just kind of chatting about like career and school and all the things that I was doing. And at the time, I was deeply in my yoga practice. Like I was going to yoga all the time. Like it was a priority. And I don't know, she just kind of said something that made me go, maybe I will do that yoga teacher training. I had applied for it. No, I had started to apply for it and promptly stopped applying for it the year before. And this conversation made me go back and just say, okay, I'm just going to submit the application, see what happens. And then while I was in school for social work, while I was still working in crisis intervention and being a mentor, I got into the yoga teacher training program. So um, I was a busy person. I was always doing kind of everything, right? At that time. And I will say, like, yoga teacher training, I picked one that was very specific, right? Because when you get into yoga, you can specialize. You can do yoga for kids, yoga for preschoolers, yoga for teenagers, like yoga for MS, yoga for diabetes. Like you can specialize. And my specialization in heart was in social work. So I picked a yoga teacher training that was trauma informed, accessible, and social justice oriented, right? Because those were the things that I was interested in. And I will say it was probably the best experience as far as education is concerned ever, right? It was so interesting. I probably have not had more fun doing an education program than going into yoga teacher training. Like I just haven't. Um, no offense, high school teachers, you guys are great. I loved history. It was amazing. But if I'm being real, like my yoga teacher training was just the most fun. And like it was still school. Like you still had to turn in homework. You still had practicum. You still had to show up and create classes and show up in the community and take other teachers' classes and review those teachers' classes. Like, how did they teach? What was their tone? What was their style? All of those things. So it's still a training program. It's just if you are deeply interested in something, it's going to feel different, right? And that's something I think I want you guys to really take note of. There's some things that you're going to do because you have to do them for school to, get the grade or whatever. But when you pick what you really want to do and you are really highly interested in it, it's not going to feel as much as like a drag as some things will. Right? It's just not. Um, but anyway, that's kind of how I got started into yoga. And the yoga teacher training that I took was accelerated because, of course, it was. Like most people, it's like a year, right? Mine was, I think it was like 6 months, and it was every single weekend. Um, yeah, it was every single weekend except like Thanksgiving and Christmas or something. And it was like 1 weeknight a week. So I did that while I was in school. Yeah, I don't recommend doing that much stuff all together, because then you have no time for anything else. So if you could take away anything from me just talking about how much I did and when I did it, like spread things out. It's okay to spread things out. You don't have to get it all done at once. Although that was my whole personality as like under 30 was I need to do it. I need to do it all now and I need to get it all done. And I want to be this now. Right. It's part of the reason I didn't want to go to a 4 year institution. I was like, that's 4 whole years. That's a long time. Like, what? I would be a doctor. That's like 8 years. Why would I do that? Like, okay, 8 years is actually not that long, but like time changes in your 20s and 30s. It changes. And you think 1 year is a very long time. It's not. Trust me on this, okay? If you want to do something and you're like, oh, but it's like 8 years, just do it. Just do it. And trust me on this. Just do it. You'll be done by the time you're 25, and then you'll be able to have a good time. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about yoga teacher training. So remember, I said there's different ways to be a yoga teacher. Um, and training's kind of interesting in the yoga teacher world because there's not really a major accrediting body, right? And an accrediting body is like the place that says this training's good, this training's bad, this training has all the things we want you to know, this training doesn't. Remember, I said that yoga is a 3,000-year-old field, right? It has ancient origins, okay? That means it's very hard to accredit something that is
Mm.
3,000 years old, right? So there is like the Yoga Alliance, and a lot of people will kind of get their teacher training that's certified through the Yoga Alliance, okay? Most yoga teachers don't like Yoga Alliance. Uh, they just don't. Um, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Mainly, they don't really push the field forward in a positive way, and a lot of their decisions are about lobbying for like research, but not for yoga teachers, right? But I digress on that. So that's kind of not really the official accrediting body, but if you work for certain places, they might say the Yoga Alliance because that's all they know. They're just like kind of grab onto it. Um, but for the most part, it really doesn't matter. What matters most with your yoga teacher training is that it resonates with you. Okay. It needs to be something you are actually interested in. So if your yoga teacher training is all about structural anatomy of the body, but you're interested in trauma informed care, it was probably a really bad fit. Okay. Because structural anatomy yoga teachers do a lot of things that are not trauma informed, right? So they don't go together. And many yoga teacher trainings are not trauma informed. So if you are interested in like trauma informed care, recovery, accessibility with like working with people with injuries and things like that, you really need to think about that as you pursue your education. So, first things first, if you're going to become a yoga teacher, you have to have been practicing yoga for most teacher trainings at least a year. I will say that's actually a very short amount of time because a year can be once a week, right? And that's just not enough for you to be comfortable, even sometimes in a yoga class, let alone in a teacher training program. Um, I suggest at least like 3 years of like practicing, showing up to different types of classes with different types of teachers and things like that. But really, the prerequisite to a yoga teacher training is actually doing yoga. Like it's actually showing up and being present and knowing what that is and all of that. You don't have to know everything, right? It's good when you don't know everything, but just enough to where if you're doing a class and you understand what the teacher's saying, right? And that'll make it more comfortable for you to be in a yoga teacher training. I'll say it like that. And it'll help you be a teacher because you can't teach if you haven't done something, right? It doesn't work the same. Okay. So there are levels to yoga teacher trainings. So we have a yoga teacher training 200 hour. You have a yoga teacher training 300 hour, and then you have a yoga teacher training 800 hour. And there's some variations in between, and then they start to stack and combine. Um, to be honest, most likely you all should be focusing on a yoga teacher training 200 hour, because after that, you want to go teach and you want to go specialize. Okay. Because if you keep going, you're just going to get more yoga teacher training. But you might not get that training in trauma. You might not get that training in, um, let's say, physical health or injuries. If you want to work with like multiple sclerosis or things like that, you're not going to get that training from a more yoga teacher training. So you really have to decide what your specialization is. So for me, like I said, I was already in school to be a social worker, right? And I had been working in social work that whole time. So I was getting in person like job experience as a crisis intervention and trauma, like frontline trauma worker, right? So a lot of experience comes directly from the field for me, right? Along with some of that education and social work and stuff like that, but mostly in person in the field doing jobs in trauma and stuff like that. And so I think it's really important if you're going to do this type of field to make sure that you kind of teach everywhere. So I'll say my first year as a yoga teacher, I taught at domestic violence shelters, I taught at colleges, I taught at a couple of conferences, I taught in nursing homes, I taught in adult daycares, I taught in regular daycares, I taught in schools, churches. If there was a place to teach, I said yes, so that I could get experience and also so that I could know what it felt like to teach in those places. Right? What does it feel like to teach adults in adult daycares? What does it feel like to teach people with like intellectual disabilities? What does it feel like to teach in a domestic violence shelter, um, or a nonprofit, or those different things? I definitely said yes to a lot in that first year because I just felt it was like really, really important to understand environments, right? Um, and if you notice, I haven't really mentioned a lot about teaching in gyms or yoga studios. um, I have taught in both those places. I have. They're not my favorite places to teach. Okay, they're just not. I don't find them exciting in any way. It's a lot more fun to teach in some other places with like people who don't go to yoga, um, or who want to learn in different types of environments. I find that really interesting. Um, so we're coming to a little bit of a midway point, and like I said, I am long-winded. I could talk a lot, and I want to make sure that if there's questions or something that I need to kind of tap into, that I pause now to kind of hear if there's any questions or thoughts or like desires for us to know certain things that my brain hasn't gotten to yet. And you can use the chat box and all of that too.
Students, now's your chance to get it targeted, especially to your interests. So ask away.
Yeah, I know. I want to make sure y'all get a chance to actually like ask a question if you have one or any thoughts or like some people really like day in the life of and just different things. Okay, yeah. Where's the money?
Show me
So
the money.
I'm gonna say that that is probably the yeah. Okay. So okay, do I interact with people or is it more of a silent class? It depends. Um, and it really depends on where you are, who you're teaching, and the vibe that day. You know, if the vibes are good, then you might interact a little bit more. If the vibes are off and people just kind of need to like click in with themselves and they're really shut off, you might interact a little bit less. Or you might kind of actually interact a little bit more and like throw jokes out there and like, you know, try to make people lighten up a little bit. It just depends. Um, but a lot of it is about building rapport with people. So I will say it is kind of so a lot of introverts are yoga teachers. Most of the people who are yoga teachers for whatever reason are introverts. And you know, by the time we get home, we're like, I don't want to talk to you. I talked all day, right? Because we kind of do end up talking a lot. So yeah, you are going to interact with people, but throughout class, you might not as much. It's more instructional. Yeah, that's a really good question. And then I want to get back to the money before I go into how do you find a good yoga teacher. So money wise, it is so variable based on where you teach, what you do, all of that. The number one thing you need to know about making money as a yoga teacher is you are an entrepreneur. You are not hired by anyone. You are not an employee. So what you make is up to you. How you make money is up to you. And it is negotiable. It's always negotiable. And a lot of it is like deciding your worth. So a lot of the reasons I don't teach in gyms and yoga studios is because those are the lowest paying spaces for a yoga teacher. Those are like minimum wage. It's basically minimum wage, right? It'll look okay if you've had other types of jobs, but when you recognize that a yoga teacher probably isn't going to teach 30 group classes, it doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, maybe it does to you, but it is. It is because you have to plan 30 classes. You have to show up and drive to 30, maybe 30 different places, depending, right? And that driving time is also your time. So yoga teachers, you're not going to teach 30 group classes. Um, so like starting there, it is so variable. There are teachers that make 30,000 a year. There are teachers that make 400K a year. It and that range is a true range. But you have to recognize that you are an entrepreneur and the money you make really is up to you. If you want to make more money, I suggest always corporate and private clients. Okay. If you do corporate and private clients, you'll be fine. You'll probably make 90, 100. If you play your cards right and do what you need to do, that's probably what you'll make. but do corporate and private clients, and recognize it's going to take time to build that up. So the first year, you're probably going to be on the lower range of things because you're still trying to figure out where you like to teach, what you like to teach, who you like to teach, and who likes to learn from you. Okay, because everyone doesn't want to learn from you. Everybody doesn't like your teaching style, and that's not about you, it's about them. It's an exchange, right? And so that's something you also have to recognize. It's like, you're not for everyone, I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. I don't need you to show up here. Like, it's okay, right? And that's why you kind of build your network with other yoga teachers, because some people teach people differently and it's better for them. And I'd rather you get what you need from the practice than make it about me, right? Because some people are really into like fitness yoga, and that's not my thing. I don't like hot yoga. I don't want to like do 108 sun salutations. It's not going to happen. Okay. I have no interest. But there are people who love that stuff and they're so into it. And then the people that are into that go there, right? But if you're into like that more therapeutic, that philosophy, you want somebody to talk about chakras with you and stuff like that, and like really get into it and dig into some of that other side of yoga, then I'm probably the person that you will resonate with a little bit more. So it all just kind of depends. And I feel like I'm answering two questions at once in a little bit. But like I said, money wise, if we get down to it, group classes are the thing that you need to minimize if you want to maximize for income, right? So you might teach at like a studio because that studio or that particular place is a place where you can find private clients or you can widen your network, right? So recognize why you're teaching there, right? Is it what they pay you, or is it the connections that that place can build? Because again, you're an entrepreneur, you're 1099, you're not an employee. You can leave anytime, they can leave anytime. There is no 2-week notice. There's nothing there, right? You're not getting health insurance, you got to pay for that yourself. So recognize you are an entrepreneur. You are self-employed as a yoga teacher. There are very few employee positions as a yoga teacher. More of those are popping up with like the VA and different like mental health hospitals and stuff like that. So, and I see that actually growing quite a bit, but that's probably going to be for people who have a little more experience also in mental health. Yeah, I get that question a lot. Let me make sure I elaborate on private clients, different companies, one-on-one clients, specific studios. What do you mean by specific studios?
Just like different locations that might want to hire you.
Elaborate.
I don't know. I guess
Elaborate just a little bit.
that's what I'm wondering is what are the different like private clients? Would it come from studios? Like would a dance studio
like
hire
where
you?
your private clients would come from. Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that all also depends. Okay. Like I said, you are a business owner. That means you need to be, in a way, finding your own clients. So putting the information out there. So if you're in a studio or maybe you're in a gym that's a part of an apartment, that's like a nicer apartment, those are great places to kind of find clients. Not just a regular gym, but like the gym that's a part of like a fancy apartment and they have yoga classes. Great place to find private clients. And a little bit different than just teaching in a box gym. Okay. Studios, I would not say are the best way to find private clients because again, you're self-employed. And in a lot of ways, the clients in the studio are the studio's clients. So there's a little bit of conflict of interest that can come about if it can come across that you're poaching clients. So that's why I say it's not like the best place, but you might be able to put that information out there, and then people will come from other places and say, hey, oh, I know this teacher that is taking clients, and it might be that they tell their cousin or their neighbor, after they hear something. That's why you have to specialize as well. And this
So
is like
do
a kind of a complicated topic. So I know it's a little bit detailed.
So do you have people then that do like one-on-one yoga sessions with you, or is it one of those that like you have all your clients and then you have classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11 to 12, and then another one from 2 to 4, and
Yeah.
then right, they come to you? Like, what does that scheduling look like for you?
So that also depends on if you're at a studio in someone else's business, or if you are creating the business, the space, all of that.
Let's
So
say that
currently,
you're
right now,
creating.
I personally am doing where I create the space. So I'm doing online yoga classes for my students at this time that they can come to, that are specifically for trauma survivors right now, right? So I have trauma recovery yoga, and right now, actually, we start in another round in June. So I went from a 10-week course that I kind of ran on Wednesday nights, and I kind of decided to rework that. And now I'm going to be offering a membership for my clients to have a couple of times a week and stuff like that. So that's all about like what type of business you want more so. If you want to contract with other people, or if you're just like, no, I'm just going to do this all on my own. And all of the approaches about that are going to be different. Okay, the business training thing, I also want to answer that. And then, okay, so how do you find a good yoga teacher to get started? So again, because I want to go back up and make sure I address all the questions. I would honestly, it depends on why you want to do yoga, right? Why do you want to do yoga? Are you tired all the time and you want to feel a little more energized? Are you anxious and you want to feel less anxious? Kind of start with why you want to try it out, and then look for teachers that kind of teach that. So like if it's anxiety, like yoga for anxiety, is there anything on YouTube? Is there anything in my city? I think most of us are in Portland, Tigard, Washington County. So you might look like yoga for anxiety, Hillsboro, to see if what's near you. And you can also do the same on YouTube. And I think that's a good place to just start. But I would not suggest just walking into a place and going to whatever class is at that time if you know nothing about yoga, because you could end up in a hot yoga class, which is like a 100-degree room where they do like power yoga, and you could pass out in the middle of class and then leave. This is a true story. Right? Because I would not suggest that. So research like, okay, I'm anxious. I want to do yoga for anxiety. I hurt my knee. I want to do a knee injury yoga. It is that specific. And there are people who specialize in all those things so that you can find what you're looking for, and you can go somewhere that makes sense, and that you won't have like a really bad first experience in a studio or wherever. Yeah, yeah. So I would say that's a good place. And then, okay, the entrepreneurial training thing. So that's a really good question. You can take like, what do they call those, business classes, but I wouldn't say that they're the best thing for learning how to start your own business and learning how to run your own business. A lot of business classes are tailored to how to run someone else's business It's all about like, getting in a company, being in a company, and like helping them run their business and their operations and stuff. But if you're talking about learning to establish your own business, honestly, YouTube University is amazing. YouTube University is amazing. Udemy, Udemy, great. And Coursera, Coursera is free specifically. They have a lot of free college courses you can take just to learn things. Those are all really good places for you to learn about some of the things you would need for running a business and growing a business. But I think the best way to learn how to grow a business is to talk to other people who are in business, right? Because they're going to be able to tell you things that a class just can't. So getting out there and networking. And when I say networking, I don't really mean like going to a networking event. I mean, when you walk into the small business in your town and you see this person has started a plant shop, ask them about it. Ask them about their plant shop. Ask them how it feels to work in their plant shop. Ask them how business has been. Ask them like how they got things started, and making those connections with real people in your neighborhood, in your town, is probably the single best way, not only to network, but just to find out things about how to grow a business. Because someone with a successful crystal shop or something that you walk into and you're like, okay, how did you do this? They're probably going to tell you things that it's never going to be in a textbook. It's just never going to be there, right? Just little tips and tricks, and make sure you pay this LLC thing, or make sure you file your taxes like this, or pay your quarterly taxes. Those are things that oftentimes get missed, and like how to actually grow something is very difficult. A lot of people can tell you about scaling. A lot of people can tell you about keeping things functioning or keeping things as they go. But not a lot of people can tell you how to build the ground that you're standing on. Not a lot of people can tell you how to build a foundation. And there's not a lot of like classes out there that aren't very, very, very basic. So most of them are going to tell you about forming an LLC, and some of that stuff, and you'll just see it over and over again. And you're like, okay, but after this, what else? So a lot of it really is like, talk to the person that owns the thrift shop in town on Main Street. They're going to give you a lot of information. Tell people what you do. If you're a yoga teacher, if you're a therapist, if you're a physical therapist, tell people what you do. That is how you grow things. That is like hands down the best way to actually grow something, and from nothing. So that's kind of what I'd say about the entrepreneurial stuff. Yeah. Let's see. Did I answer all the questions?
I have a question, two questions. So you and I met because you were working for a corporation, and how did that connection happen? So you didn't work at a fitness studio or a yoga studio. So how did that happen? Did they find you or you go to them? So that part of like, right, marketing yourself.
Yeah, I found
so
them.
That's one. Found them?
I found them. As that new location was opening, they were looking to fill their yoga instructor spot, because all Montanitos have a movement instructor. And I had been looking for more of a therapeutic place to teach yoga in. So I ended up finding that because I was consistently looking. Yeah. So sometimes you have to look when you don't even need to look, because there might be an opportunity. But like for me, it was more so I was definitely like looking like, okay, it would be cool to teach yoga in this type of place. And so I just kind of kind of kept putting feelers out and putting feelers out, which is a part of that entrepreneurial thing where it's like, doesn't matter. And you're just kind of like, what's out here, you know?
You got to hustle.
Yeah. And if that's not your strong suit, that's totally fine. It doesn't mean that you like won't be able to be a yoga teacher. It just might mean that you're going to do it differently. It might mean that maybe you are going to reach out to yoga studios, because like most yoga studios, they don't have an application. There is no application. The way that you get to teach your first class is you go to that studio, you find out who the owner of that studio is. If the owner of the studio teaches classes, which they should be, you go to their classes. You kind of start a conversation with them. Then you email them and you ask about auditioning or subbing, and you audition to teach. Right? So this is kind of some of the stuff that people don't realize is like you actually audition and they ask you to demonstrate. And so that can kind of feel a little bit nerve-wracking because you're auditioning and it like shouldn't be a show, but it's kind of weird. So even that is one way that the yoga industry is a little bit different, is that it starts with that connection.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
so you said you're a yoga teacher, correct? So, which is philosophy based and showing movement. So what does that look like in your practice of integrating the two together? And what do you do to, I guess, like continuing education or staying relevant with what is going on, since you do trauma-informed care, trauma work, that is in line with like maybe what your the people who you work with in support of like their therapists or counselors?
Yeah, I mean, so continuing education wise, that's an interesting topic for the yoga field as a whole. But also, since I'm a social worker, there's other continuing education that goes in line with the field I've chosen. That's just present in there. So a lot of, again, I'll go back to Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance does have continuing education credits, but you're an entrepreneur. And so continuing education is choose your own adventure. I'll answer that in a second. What a day in your life is like. It really is choose your own adventure. So I'll say right now, I actually don't need continuing education in like trauma informed care, because I've spent the past like 7 years working in high trauma fields, doing trauma informed care, doing just like my whole world has been trauma, right? And trauma work and understanding and all that. So that's not actually where I need to put a lot of my energy into. Now it's more so shifting into building structures and yeah, just like that, building structures, building out email listings, learning how to like write catchy headlines, um, growing an email list. So this is kind of where things go into the business realm of, in business, there's always more to learn, because it's always changing. And of course, changing with social media and stuff like that. Please, someone, okay, I call TikTok tickles. And so I really want that to catch on. If y'all could call it the tickles because it makes you giggle, that would be great. This is my plug for a whole brand change on TikTok, okay? But understanding branding and like, is that important? Understanding marketing, but not just marketing, concise messaging, all of that stuff. And again, it's really important to go to, I mean, even TikTok University is great. TikTok University is so great because like people just give you information that is actually really good and what you need right then and there. It's important not to overwhelm yourself with like all the things. I'm trying to figure out if I actually answered that question fully.
Yeah, so I guess the integration of the joining of philosophy and showing movement, what does that look like in your
Oh, yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah,
working with clients?
yeah. So I guess it's by doing because like again, you can't teach what you don't do. But it ends up just being in the things that I say is how that's integrated, right? Um, and it's different for every single client, right? Like the way that I would do that. So some clients I would show, some clients I would tell. And with that philosophy, it's all in the way that you're speaking about how to move the body or what it feels like to be in a body or to have a body. One of the questions that I'm really interested in right now is like, where do you exist in your body? Like, where are you?
Mm.
Like, are you behind your eyes? Are you in your heart? Are you in the back of your head? Like, where is the thing that feels like you? And
Mm.
how does that move? Right. So it it's interwoven because that is what I do. So it's not so much of like something you can make happen because it's about the practice. And that's when yoga gets super philosophical and it's already philosophical for me. So then it's like you just go into a philosophy conversation. so so like it's kind of like a hard, like weird question to talk about, but it's there. Even in like the way that you present something, because as a yoga teacher, you are a presenter, you are a facilitator, you are facilitating a conversation with the body mind, right? And we don't get to have a lot of conversations about body mind or body wisdom. So saying things like one of the yoga teachers that is really big in the restorative yoga field, she always says like, don't write a check your body can't cash, right? You're not going to be able to go back and uninjure your knee. So why are you going to do something that causes you pain? Right? So even in the way that we present information as we're moving through each posture is going to show us and tell us how to integrate that like philosophical element to it. So for me, it's just what I do because that's how I practice. But for other teachers, they might integrate more of like the skeletal muscular stuff and talk about the I don't know, I can't even do it. Like the scapula and how it moves when you reach your arm up and the lines of your anatomy. And they're really interested in that. And that's how they're going to teach because that's what they're thinking about and what feels important as they practice. So that's something that really is when we say you have to practice yoga before you become a teacher, and then you have to practice teaching what you are experiencing in a lot of ways, and then back off and let people experience their own experience. But that's just philosophy about how being a teacher anyway. So so it's like circles. But I would go day in the life and then because I think I'm running out of time. I told you guys I'm like long-winded. I'll just talk all day. So day in the life depends, right? Depends on how busy you are and how busy you want to be. So I generally don't like having any classes before 10. I do have a 9 a.m. class right now. Not fond of having classes before 10. I am not. I am not. I taught one class at 6:30 and I was just like, I feel like I'm gonna die. Okay, I'm not that person. So 11 o'clock is a great time for me to start class. So that means if I have an 11 o'clock a.m. as my first class, my morning's gonna start with like tea and breakfast. Like I'm just kind of chilling. Like that is my morning. I want to chill. Um, I might go to TikTok University. It just depends on the day. And and then I kind of like, put on my yoga stuff because you have to, it's actually really important what you wear to class to teach, because like if you wear things that are kind of baggier, people can't see what you're doing. Um, so a lot of things make sense. But you should be comfortable always be comfortable. Um, but yeah, put on my like yoga clothes or whatever. And I might have an 11 a.m. If you are teaching and you are in your first year teaching, I'll kind of go off of that because now I've kind of figured things out to where I don't have to have more than 6 classes in a week. So my days look very different. But that first year, you might have a 9 o'clock class, an 11 a.m. class, right? And they might be at the same place, they might be at different places, right? So if you do a 9 a.m. class, you're done at 10, you pack up and you're leaving that studio or that gym or that class, that college at like 10 after 10 to get to your 11 a.m. class, but you need to be there like 15 minutes early. So they're usually in the same vicinity, right? And then from noon to 3, you'll have a break and then you kind of gear up so you can get ready for your 5 p.m. class, right? So that noon till 3 is probably lunch. If you're in school or if you're doing something else, like say you are building your email newsletter, then you might write your email newsletter and have lunch and maybe make something so when you get home later, you can have dinner. And then you're probably going to head out and go to that 5 p.m. class. And then a lot of times I like to stack it where if I'm going to do a 5 p.m. class, I'm either going to have like a 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Did I say that right? Yeah, 6:30 or 7 o'clock class at the same place. And that is really one of the best ways to kind of structure your things. And if you're doing private clients, it really depends on if you are going to be teaching in their homes, which is a service you can offer, but you can charge more because you're driving to their home to deliver them their private one-on-one session, right? But have those classes spread out. And if they're a person that doesn't work normal hours, you can have them be in the morning so that you only have Monday through Thursday classes or Monday through Friday classes. In your first year, you're probably going to teach a Saturday morning class. You're going to teach a Saturday morning class. And that, but get in where you fit in, okay? And it's going to be good. But you're probably going to teach a Saturday morning class for a while. And those are really popular classes. So it's not a bad place to be, but they often end up being at like 9 o'clock. And again, I don't want to do it before 10. So that's something to think about as you're scheduling things. So oftentimes, if you're full time that first year or two, you're probably going to have 2 classes in the morning and then 2 classes in the evening. So you need to really understand time management, setting up your calendar, making sure if you have to drive in between those first 2 classes, that you have things planned out on the map of like, I can drive here in 15 minutes. I can have 15 minutes in my car, and then I can be in the studio setting up and we're good. Time management's a thing. But keep track of your mileage because like it's a lot of mileage and you should definitely put that on your taxes. Like, do we have any final questions? I think it's about that time, right?
It is.
Yeah. Do you have any final questions for me? Yeah.
Oh, hi, do you have anything for us? Not putting you on the spot, but what's the favorite part of your job, Tony? What do you like the most about it?
You know, I that's honestly like a really, really hard question because like it's not really a job. And that's kind of the thing I was trying to drill home at first is like, this is a 3,000-year-old practice that's deeper than like what I do to get paid. So like, I don't really know if I have like a favorite part because I don't really like for me, this is just what I do.
Mhm.
It's not like, oh, I get up and I go to this job and I like and then leave or whatever. It's like I'm just here, like, and it's time to teach, and it's time to, so it's kind of hard to like be like, yeah, my favorite thing is, I can say my least favorite thing probably is like the whole business side of it. Like it's fun, but at the same time, it's kind of like, nah, I'd rather just teach and not have to think about like networking and all that stuff. But it can be fun when it is basic networking, but when you get deep into business and you're like talking about, public speaking, like a lot of yoga teachers will get asked to public speech, which like I have been, and those kinds of things. When people start tapping you for those types of things, um, it can get more into the businessy side because then there's a little bit of a platform. And so I don't like some of the things that come with like the platform and like yoga as a show rather than a practice. I don't really care for some of that type of stuff. And most of the yoga teachers that I follow, they don't have a posture. Like they don't have pictures of postures on their social media. They're just talking about yoga and yoga philosophy and stuff. So I'll say like my least favorite part is like the performance. And the fact that it's a performance rather than a practice. But aside from that, like I just enjoy like what I do. So yeah.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for taking, again,
Thanks
time out of your day to
everybody.
come
Mhm.
to speak to the high school